Okay, good morning, people. Today's shir is sponsored L'Refuah Shalem for Freda Bas Rivka. She should have Refuah Shalem B'Karav. I want to talk about Purim costumes. What type of Purim costumes are okay or not okay? What the makar is? What the people who are against it is? I want to be maskil b'gnai, and then we'll work our way back to what the minig is. So there's a tshuva in a sefer called Sansan Le'Yoyer. It's a sefer by Reb Meir Mazuz. He's the Rashiva of Kisei Rachamim in Bnei Brak. He's an old man today, very old man. He's a tremendous genius. He wrote many svarim, and in the sefer that he has in Inyani Purim, he has a tshuva there in the section for tshuvas and tshuva Yud Beis. He has a tshuva where he deals with the minig of Purim costumes, and he says as follows. And before we say what the makaris for the minig is and all that, I want to tell you what he has to say about it. He says as follows: Ulam, das lenavin nakal shekal elu. All these things that I brought previously, the makaris, and we're going to do this backwards. We'll go into what the makaris are. He says, but all these makaris that I brought are rak ramazim v'smuchim ba'alma. They're just, a remez, a smach of a makar amiti leminig ayin. A real makar for the minig of wearing a Purim costume, there isn't. The karav levada, he says, by him it's pashit. Shenishtaharviv haminig b'minhagei hagayim yoshvei Europa b'mei yideyim. He says there's carnival season by Goyim, and based on the carnival season is where the minig developed to wear Purim costumes. It says Sha'archim Chagigis carnival, u'mischapsim ish leisha v'isha leish. Everyone dressing up like the opposite gender, this, that. V'shakim b'chamisha shari v'shakuim b'chamishim shari tomuki yidua. The Yaldi Yisrael, he says, Jewish children bikshu lehischakes aleim u'bikshu mehireim inyan daimalizeh. He says Jewish children who were growing up in European towns, I'm quoting directly from the Jews, he says, growing up in European towns, looked around, they saw this carnival that was happening, they lived in in Rome, they saw a major carnival, it looked like a lot of fun, and they asked their parents, could you get us such a carnival also, could you do something like that for us? And the parents decided, okay, I have 8 of you, Purim, you'll get dressed up, and then you could scratch this itch. And they were makel that little boys could dress up like little girls could dress up like little boys, because it's not so negay for them yet. Eventually, they caught on. Grown-ups started doing it. Bachrim started doing it. He says today you see couples of yeshiva bachrim. One's Vashti, one's Haman. You see groups together like this. This became the main simcha of Purim. He's complaining that they forgot to get very drunk, and instead they're just getting dressed up like Vashti. And mitzvahs matanas lavyonim, and mitzvahs riba besuda. So this is the Reb Meir Mazuz's pretty harsh take on getting dressed up for Purim. He says it's a goyish minig, it's probably b'chukaseyim, it started as copying carnival season, it went from children, eventually to adults, to bachrim, etc. And then he continues and he says, instead of spending a lot of money on fancy costumes, it would be much better off, they should give money to Moises HaTorah, shekel, and he continues. Now, so this is a very, very extreme negative take on the whole concept of Purim costumes. This is not even getting into what you're dressing up like. If you're dressing up like the wrong thing, the right thing, it's too much, too little, adults, children. He's saying right off the bat, the entire thing is based on a goyish minig of carnival that people decided to copy, and get rid of it. It's a waste of money, waste of time, waste of energy. People should just have Purim regular. Now, Lamaisa, this getting dressed up in Purim is taka minig vasa. It's an alta minig. And let's talk about where these makaris that he doesn't like. And granted, it doesn't say anywhere in a Chuvas Rashba they have to get dressed up for Purim. Granted, that's true. But let's talk about where it comes from and what the idea of getting dressed up for Purim is and how this minig starts. And I just want to point out that there's kind of like a stira in the Ramah about this. Because the Ramah, in Siman Tafresh Tzadikei, the Ramah brings down as follows. He talks about the minhagim of Purim. He says, Yeshinag ulilvesh bigdei Shabbos v'yam tov Purim. There are people who get dressed up in Shabbos clothing for Purim. That's a good thing. That's the right thing to do. He's quoting a Maril. That's the Ramah in Siman Tafresh Tzadikei. The Ramah in Siman Tafresh Tzadik Vav brings as follows: Mashinog ulilvish partzufim bePurim. This is the people wear masks on Purim. The gever loivish simlas isha. The isha kli gever, and a man wears a woman's clothing, and a woman wears a man's clothing. Ein iser b'davar. It's not aser. Me'achar she'ein mechavenin el l'simcha ba'alma. V'chein b'levish es kalayim d'Rabbanon. Then Rama brings v'yeshayim the aser. Aval aminik kisvar rishayna that it's not aser to get dressed up for Purim, even to wear clothing of the opposite gender on Purim. So the Rama in one place tells you the minig is to wear Shabbos clothing, v'chein nachain. In the other place the Rama says the minig is to get dressed up for Purim, even, pushing the limits a little bit, even doing things that are a little bit unacceptable the rest of the year, but it's fine. So the Rama seemingly is open to both of these things. So l'chayra, the Yishuv HaPashas in this question is that even in this minig of getting dressed up for Purim, and it is a minig vasik, and we'll see what all the cheshbonis are, even in this minig, I don't think that it was ever common to see full-grown adults, like the Ramah, for example, or like full-grown adults running around in full Purim regalia, dressed up like Haman or Achashverosh. The Ramah was never dressed up like Haman or Achashverosh. So Ramah is telling you there's a minig to get dressed up like this. Yeah, it's for Bachrim, it's for kids, it's for young adults maybe, but like the minig that he brings from the Maril, which is like the minig Hatayiv, is to wear big the Shabbos. I think that's pretty clear. That's how the Ramah holds. Now, I will point out that the Ramah did wear a Purim costume. We'll see in a minute. This is a fascinating coup that the Ramah himself wore a Purim costume. So where does this come from? What's the Makar? What's the Inyan? So there's a lot of different quasi-Makaris that are given. Now, obviously, the Purim story is full of like secrets and twists and turns and things that are not what they appear to be. And each one of those, somebody points out as a Makar for a Purim costume, meaning like every time there's a twist or a turn in the Megillah, so a different Sefer will say, Mikan Yesh Makar, to wear a Purim costume, because the Megillah is full of twists and turns. Now, there are two very nice reasons that are given for wearing Purim costumes that I want to share. One of them comes from the Maram Chagiz, or Moshe Chagiz, in the Sefer Eila Divrei Abris, not Eila Divrei Abris, Eila HaMitzvahs. This is quoted in the B'nai Yissaschar, brings this as a tam. He brings as follows. The Gemara Megillah says that Shalu Talmidav is Shimon ben Yochai. The Talmidim asked of Shimon ben Yochai, Mipnei man eschayvu Yisrael shabayisei adar kloya. Why was Klal Yisrael in that generation mechuyev? Why was it gepaskin to them they should be killed? So Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai tells them, Imru atem. You tell me. You know a little bit what's going on. Tell me what was happening. So they say, could it be Shenenu Mesidasei Shaleisei Rasha? They partook in Achashverosh's Suda. Could that be the reason? So he says, okay, Oibazoi Yehudim Shebe Shushan, it makes sense. But Shebeshara Aratis, they didn't partake in the Suda. Why are they in the hook for this? So they said, maybe it's because Shepalchu Nebuchadnezzar. They bowed down to Nebuchadnezzar's Avodah Zarah. So, effective Shimon Yochai, okay, fine, now you're onto something. That's a grace Aveira. Klal Yisrael bowed down to Nebuchadnezzar's, Avodah Zarah. V'chimash v'panim yesh b'davar. So then why were they let off the hook in the end? If that's the reason, if the reason was that they were obligated, they were mechuyev kloya because they deemed Avodah Zarah, so what's Hashem like, you know what, you could go. I'm going to let you slide it. I'll let you skate on this one. Chimash v'panim yesh b'davar. So they answered back, and this was what Shimon Yochai is happy with. He said, Heim le'yasu ve'lebifnim, af HaKadosh Baruch Hu le'yasu imahim el-lefnim. They only did it, as an outward show. They never really intended to accept Nebuchadnezzar's Avodah Zarah as their God. Pressed for things, they did it, they went along, they never really meant it. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu also took them to the brink, but he never really meant to be Mechayev Kloya for the whole Dar. HaKadosh Baruch Hu took the Mamish till the brink, and then he, when the goal was accomplished of Tshuva and Purim, he let them back. So says the Maram Chagiz, this is the Makar for wearing a Purim costume. Purim is a lefnim dike yamtif, meaning the outside is supposed to be something different than the inside. You're supposed to have some sort of outside, something crazy is going on the outside, and inside everything's really, really very, how it's supposed to be. So this is the reason the Ram Chagiz gives for Purim costumes. A second reason, and this one's a fascinating one that's brought down, is that there would be all sorts of aniyim who, let's say an ani who was not an officially announced ani. He was not out of the closet. He was an ani, but he didn't want to tell anybody he was an ani. Officially, he was a Baal Parnasi. He was a guy. So what they would do is, and there's two different nuschayis and two different shuvas. It brings down two different nuschayis. Some say they would send their children to collect money for them on Purim, and that maybe that's where the minig of children going around collecting money comes from. And the children would be embarrassed. Why am I going around collecting money when my friends are not collecting money? So they said, don't worry. Put on a mask, put on a robe. Now you're the Kohen Gadol, and no one knows who it is. The Kohen Gadol is collecting money. Now, in other versions, it says that the adults themselves, these aniyim, would themselves put on a Purim costume and then go to door, and it was like kind of like an open secret. Like the people in town who were too proud to come and collect money would go around the Purim with a Purim costume. They go to the regular Gvirim, and everyone was like wink, wink, nod, nod. Everybody knew what was going on. So, what is it? Like a razor campaign, exactly. So like you put on a costume, a razor campaign, everyone's happy and it's good to go. So that's a second, and that's actually a very nice reason for the makar of Purim costumes, is that Purim is right before Pesach. It's a time when everybody's going to need money. And the best way to raise money is if nobody really knows who you are and you don't have to own it. You could just kind of come in with a mask, with a costume, and you don't have to really tell anybody that you're raising money. That's a pretty good way to raise money. Now, there are many other different ramazim that are brought down for the makar of Purim costumes. Rav Meir Mazuz in his tshuva over here, he actually brings a bunch of them. He says, Lamashal Charvaina was Eliyahu Hanavi, Gabriel made Vashti grow a tail, so a tail is like a costume. She dressed up like some sort of animal. Charvaina was Eliyahu Hanavi, so Eliyahu Hanavi dressed up like Charvaina. There's many of these twists in the Megillah where somebody was not what they presented to be at face value, and that's like a makar for the costumes. Now, it's interesting, and this is what I want to point out with the Ramah. So, one second. So Lamaisa, it's kilu like it's a, how you want to say it? It's a kinder sheminig, right? It's a kinder sheminig to get dressed up in a costume. It's very, joyous. You go have fun. You're dressed up. Whatever the reason would be, whatever these makaris would be, it's kinder sheminig. Now, in the Sefer Leva Ivri, which is a sefer that Rav Akiva Yosef Schlesinger, we spoke about him in the past. He was the one who wanted to reinstate blowing shofar on Shabbos in Yerushalayim, like in the early 1900s. So he's a fascinating character. Just I'll give a quick bio. He was born in Pressburg in the Chassam Sofer's town. His father was a Talmud of Chassam Sofer. Chassam Sofer was the sandik at his bris, and it was that day that they heard the besura that Rav Akiva Eger was nifter in Poza, and Chassam Sofer instructed his father to name the child Akiva after Akiva Yosef after Rav Akiva Eger. And he got the name Rav Akiva Yosef Schlesinger. He learns by the Ksav Sefer and the Machna Chaim. He ends up becoming an Edinburgh of Hillel Kalamaya, who's another Talmud of Chassam Sofer, a Greisa Kanoi, a real frontline Hungarian Kanoi, like the Satmar of the day, mamish, like the most Kanois in Hungary. He, as a young man in his low 30s, has a dream that he has to move to Eretz Yisrael. He moves to Eretz Yisrael. He gets in there. He finds only trouble. He gets into fight after fight after fight. Eventually, he retires from public life, like in his 50s, and he kind of just learns in his house, writes Svarim, and then he has a big rehabilitation, and people realize that he was just misunderstood, and ultimately he becomes from the Ziknei Yerushalayim. Rav Yosef Chaim Zonnenfeld did a shidduch with him, he becomes Chatan with Rav Yosef Chaim, and etc. But he had a troubled, tragic life of some kind or another. Now, one of his first Svarim that he published was a sefer called Leva Ivri. Now, Leva Ivri, I don't know if there's other Svarim like this. It might be a unique, a one-off sefer. It's a pirush on a tzava. He took the Chassam Sofer's tzava, which is a few pages long, and he made a pirush on the side of it, one line of tzava with many paragraphs of Leva Ivri. Now, right out the gate, when the Chassam Sofer starts instructing his family how they should look at life, the Chassam Sofer says, "Atem banei abnoisei chasanei v'nichpadei uvneim shemuni v'chayu." He says, "My family, friends, Romans, countrymen, my family here, everybody, listen to me." He says, Al tat levavchem lehisoilu alilas bereshes anshe poyeli oven achadashim mikarav. Don't pay attention. Don't be nispal. Don't join on with the chiddush makers, the new people of the day. And he's referring to all the new isms and the movements that were going on in the day, like Kaidu, like some Sefer held, Chadash Hasman Atayr, like he writes in his Tshuva. So Sefer right out the gate is writing to his family, stay away from the chachim. Don't do anything that's new. And in the beer over here from the Leva Ivri, the Rabbi Akiva Yosef Schlesinger brings two fascinating stories about the Ramah. Now, the Ramah is known to be the Mekim Oila Shel Minig Ashkenaz, right? The Ramah is the one who instituted Minhagim, took Minhagim extremely seriously, even sometimes when they're a little bit in conflict with some halacha aspects. The Ramah was a big supporter of Minhagim. So he brings the Leva Ivri, about the Ramah's Weltanschauung, like his worldview of prioritizing Minhagim and not changing and not doing any shinuyim, which the Chassam Sofer adapted for himself and was instructing his family to pass on. He says, Minig number one, he says, you want to know why the Ramah took Minhagim so seriously? He says, Maisal or Ramazal, Kasher Bola Kroka, when he came to Krakow, there was a minig that Bizman Tfilas Mitzvah Shalisha, when a woman would go to the mikvah, Hayitzarach HaBal Mikvah Leimel HaBal Yisha B'Sek Nesses Mazel Tov. The minig was that the mikvah manager would meet the husband of said woman in the shul and he would say Mazel Tov. Now when the Ramah moved there, he felt that this was public and unseemly, and this was not an appropriate minig to have, attached to this. And the Ramah was mevatel this minig. He says, this is not appropriate, this shouldn't be. He got rid of this minig, he says. And then he says, what happened? Story happened, he says, Halach HaBal Mikvah L'Ashok U'Paga B'Yeshechad V'Shol HaBal Mikvah B'Regez. This guy asked the Bal Mikvah angrily, V'Chi'enani Bal Abayis? What am I? I'm a second-class citizen, I'm not like everybody else. You're not going to tell me Mazel Tov when my wife went to the mikvah? And he says, well, first of all, rather that minig is over, the Ramah is batlet, and v'oid, your wife didn't go to the mikvah. She didn't, so I have no reason to say Mazel Tov to you. He says, what do you mean she didn't? She told me she did. And they were running to the Ramah with the Shaila, And the Ramah says, oh, now I see already why you can't chap with minhagim. And from there is supposedly where the kernel of the Ramah's, tremendous adherence to minhagim started. Now this is what he brings as like a source, and then he brings a fascinating story. He says, Shemati Maisa. Now there's certain historic inaccuracies in the story, but it's not relevant. The story is the story. He says, Shemati Maisa meha Ramah zal, Asher meis ben lamed gimel shanim, that the Ramah died when he was 33 years old, which is not, I think he died probably a little older than that, but Pachas Yaiser, for the storyline, it needs to be 33 anyhow. The Ramah died at 33 years old. Umeis Balag Ba'imr, that is absolutely true. V'asa lamed gimel svarim, that's not exactly true. He made 33 svarim. We certainly don't have 33 svarim, not in Kisvayad or printed, or whatever, so certain details here. V'hasaftin, he says, the Bala Hesped, who was saying the Hesped, Sipra Lav Lamed Beis Shvachim. He said 32 milas about the Ramah, and then he was struggling. He said, I need a 33rd. Because everything here is 33. Svarim are 33, he's 33, it's like Baimer. For symmetry's sake, I need a 33rd mile about the Ramah. And that's the Saftin was struggling over there, he says. He was trying to think of one more Shevach he could say about the Ramah. One old man said, hey, I have something for you. He says, the Zakin Echad stood up and said, on every Purim, Lilvish Partzif, he would put on a mask, and he would get dressed up in he took off his frock and he put on a peacoat and a mask, and nobody knew who he was, he said. But here's the punchline. It wasn't just to get dressed up. He would go around Purim night when it's a hard time to catch a Ma'ariv, when people are drunk in the middle of the Suda, he would put on a mask and he'd put on a different thing so no one knew who he was, and he'd go around Ma'ariv. So the 33rd mile that they thought of to say about the Ramah is that he got dressed up for Purim and he thinks. So there's a few nukudas over here that's relevant l'ninenu. Aleph is that it doesn't seem like the Ramah wore a Purim costume all Purim. It sounds like it was, to serve the greater good of going around to get that from Meir, which would stem with what we said in the Ramah's, in the two ways the Ramah says it. L'chayr, the Ramah himself kept like the Maril, meaning to wear big day Shabbos v'chein nachin. That's l'chayr what the Ramah, as a Rav of Krakow would have done. He says, and the minig to wear a costume, which he held was acceptable, so that he employed that tactic when it came time to getting a tzibur together for Ma'ariv. He would put on a costume and go around and get that from Ma'ariv. Now, incidentally, this chiluk of like that, sometimes you wear it, sometimes you don't wear it, you see in the Anoy Katzain Yosef, I think, from Yosef Yos B'Shamish, he brings over there the minig of wearing a costume, and when he describes it, he says that the Bachurim and Bachurot, he says girls and boys, the Bachurim and the Bachuris wear costumes, and they're mistavivim in the shul, and they walk around, and this is the minig that everybody wears a costume, and they dress up, and it enhances Simchas Purim tremendously. So again, you'll notice the diik over there that he says that it's boys and girls, it's not, men and women. So that's Aleph. It seems to be like a younger minig. Now, Mitzacheni, you do see that he writes that girls also dressed up in costumes of some sort, which is itself a halacha shal. It's not so simple. Now, so where is the issue over here that's shavuot chol nefesh? Meaning, let's say we've certainly established enough that this minig is an alta minig. It's a minig that's quoted by the Gedolei Olam, and what Rameir Mazuz says, to be vatalid and that it's goyish and whatever, does not seem to be the standing premise of our Gedolei Olam. So we know that l'chayra it's a fine thing to do, and the Stipler, when he was told this, I'll say this, it's pretty biting. In Archas Rabbeinu and Chelik Gimel, when they told the Stipler, they didn't say who. They said when there are Rabbanim who are coming out and saying that Purim costumes are chukas hagoy and it's a bad thing. The Stipler said, and I don't know, I can't tell you the facts, but the Stipler said, no, Adarabba, they took it from us. The Goyim wearing costumes different times a year they copied our minig of wearing Purim costumes. And then this is the acerbic line, the Stipler threw at the end. He says, now everybody became a Meir Ha'ir Rabbim. Everybody thinks they should tell everybody what to do. It's in Archas Rabbeinu Chelik Gimel, you can look it up. This is what the Stipler said. So the Stipler certainly held that this was a minig vasik, a heilige minig that Klal Yisrael should adhere to wear, Purim costumes, and he was not nispal from people who were coming to try to tear it down. So now where is the Yenakuda, a critical nakuda over here that is worth noting, that maybe is not so simple? And that is the part that we keep seeing mentioned about men wearing ladies' clothing, ladies wearing men's clothing. Now, Gevein Loch, we know there's an isser of leisilbash, right? A person is not allowed to wear the clothing of the opposite gender. That's a pasuk mefurish in the Torah. It's pasuk like that in Yeridei and some Kuf Pei Beis, I believe. Kuf Pei Chas, Kuf Pei Beis, Kuf Pei Beis. Kuf Pei Beis, I think, is the isser of leisilbash. A person is not allowed to do that. We know that that's a isser mefurish. Now, so where does it come from that on Purim this isser of wearing leisilbash could be suspended? So surprisingly, it's not a bootleg heter. this is a very, very well established heter. It comes from the tshuva of the Mari Mintz. The Mari Mintz is like a borderline Rishon, Kamada Rishon, I don't know, right on that border between Rishonim and Achronim. He's the Maram Padva's grandfather, I believe, grandfather-in-law. He lived in Padua. He was a cousin of the Ramah. I can't tell you exactly how they were related, but the Mari Mintz, the Marshal, the Ramah were all cousins. So he's from the elite Ashkenazi poskim who happen to have lived in Italy. And in his Chuvas, in Shailas Chuvas Mari Mintz, in Chuvah Yud Zayin, the Shaila is about Advar Levishas HaPartzufim Shenoig and Lovish Bachurim Vegam Basulis Zakeinim Ibn Yarim Purim, elderly and younger. He says by him he's describing the minig young and old. No differentiation between old people and young children. He says the minig is to wear this, and he brings so Isi Lahatir. It's a good minig from Gedei Le'olam, and then he brings what about the idea of them dressing up, like each other, like the opposite min. So says the Mari Mintz as follows, and it's a whole shtickle Torah. He brings a raya from Gemara Nazir and a Gemara Avodah Zara, where he builds out this entire theory, and this is very relevant to halacha in other cases as well, that as long as a person's not putting on clothing of the opposite gender, like lehidamis to them, meaning no one's trying to dress up like a woman. It's just to make freilach, right? To do something that like mamish is out of the ordinary and like catches everybody's eye. It's like, whoa, look at this guy. Like it's not about getting dressed up like the other men. It's just to make attention, to make simcha, to grab some attention. So says the Mari Mintz that I'll read it for you. He says, provided that he says as follows. He brings a raya from a smag like this. Provided that you're not doing it lihidamis to get dressed up like the other men, then it's permitted to do this. He says, and he brings like this, and he says, and therefore not to be involved with this minig. It's a minig. It's an old minig, and even though it involves dressing up like the opposite men, it's fine. In this hechatimta, it's fine. Now the Mari Mintz is a very, very chashuv source, and this is what the Ramah is relying on when the Ramah says that it's a machlekes, 2 days if you can or you can't. But Yachalis with the minig is to be samech on the day of Rishayna, which is the Mari Mintz, which is his much older cousin, who says that you can be samech on the Mari Mintz is a very serious source. Now Lamaisa, most of the poskim who come after him did not agree with him. The Bach in Yeridei and Kofei Beis, and the Taz in Yeridei and Kofei Beis, and the Pri Megadim and Archaim, and the Chida, and the list goes on and on, more and more. All the Rabbi Yeshayahu Pinto Harishan, the Rabbi Yeshayahu Pinto today's great grandfather, who lived in Tzfas during the Kufat Beis Yosef, he has a child tshuva sefer called Nivcha Mikesef. So over there he has a tshuva about it. Many Gedalim who came after the Mari Mintz strongly disagreed with the Mari Mintz about this premise, and they said that no, as long as the Yisrael Silbash does not differentiate between these two types of dressing up, Silbash is Silbash, and you can't do this. Lamaisa, the Mishnah Brura, when he brings down this Indian, the Mishnah Brura is a little bit cryptic. The Mishnah Brura says as follows. The Mishnah Brura says, he brings this minig that the Ramah says, Yesh Lismech, that you could dress like whatever you want. He says, I am b'yeredeis, im kuf beis, shekasav sham hataz b'shem abach, sheyesh levatul minig zeh. He says, the Taz and the Bach, they argue on the Mari Mintz, and they say you should be vatul this minig. Heim b'purim, oy b'simchas nesuim, and this has other the applications, like by a wedding or by plays, is where it's very negay. Where the place can talk about a lot is by plays, when people want to get dressed up by a play, to make a skit or a play or a Purim show or whatever it is. So it's the gay there also. So Ramah says he brings the Taz and the Bach. The Vilna Gaon's grandfather. Then the Mishnah Brura brings down a Pri Megadim that says if you just wear one beged of the opposite gender, meaning overall you still look like a man or a woman, whatever your respective gender is, and you do one thing, you put on that's wrong, then maybe you could make it. He brings a Pri Megadim. So seemingly the Mishnah Brura, without ever lahedya being machriya against the Mari Mintz, clearly he's pushing you in that direction. He's saying Taz and the Bach, the Veragel, they argue. Pri Megadim's mekel, but the one he chooses to mekel is not the Mari Mintz. He doesn't bring the Mari Mintz as mekel, and Memela, it's a toss-up. He says the Pri Megadim's mekel if you only wear one thing wrong. So seemingly the Mishnah Brura also is on the team that you're not supposed to really get dressed up like the opposite gender in Gansin, only if it's, overall you look like what you're supposed to look like, and it's just one little nakuda, then the Mishnah Brura is mekel. So, in this regard of not being samech to get dressed up like the opposite min, so there, that taka, Reb Meir Mazuz in his tshuva goes off on that taka also, and Ravadia and Yechavadas and Chelekei also strongly is against it, but that taka, most Paiskim and Rav Chaim and Rabbi Yashiv and others also agreed that the halach is that a person should not get dressed up like the opposite gender on Purim, notwithstanding that the Mari Mintz is a davar chashiv that you can be samech on, and the Ramah brings it in Shulchan Aruch, but not mamish to do it. Now, I'll just to end off with this one thing. It's just a great story. It has nothing to do with it's not really adding anything to the narrative here, but by the Shpal Yizeda, one of the early rabbis, there seemed to have been a specific method of meifis doing that he would do that was attached to Purim costumes. I'll say one story, but I don't think it's a one-off. I think there was many stories like this. There's a story that a guy who had found some sort of windfall that he was not allowed to take. He found some sort of windfall of some coins that really belonged to the government. He took it, and some fellow Jews of his who were jealous of him ratted him out to the authorities, and they were coming for him, and he had a court date. He had to go to the Ir Habira, whatever it was, to the main city to face the judge and to resolve this case. So he comes crying to the Shpal Yized and he says, I don't know what to do. I'm like up the creek here. I took these coins. People, told on me, and there's Eidus Sheker, he says, they're not going to be honest, and I don't stand a chance. So the Shpal Yized asked him, when's your date in court supposed to be? My date in court is supposed to be Tu B'Shvat. He says, push it off till Purim. If you can push it off till Purim, everything's going to be fine. Okay, he contacts the court, no problem, they push it off till Purim. He says, okay, now what do I do? Comes to Shpal Yized, tells him, when you go there to the court, look around the courtroom, you're going to seek out this lawyer. His name is whatever, make up a name, seek out this lawyer, and he's going to be able to win the case for you. So he says, but how would I know who he is? How am I going to find him? He says, this lawyer has a minig, he wears red shoes and white gloves. You'll always be able to find him. He's a white glove, red shoe lawyer. It's not hard to find him. Okay, fine, no problem. We'll go on Purim, we'll find this lawyer. So this Yid sets out a few days before Purim to the city wherever he's going to face the judge, and he's full of confidence. The Shpal Yized told him which lawyer to use. Obviously, the Shpal Yized has contacts with this lawyer, and everything's going to be fine. Now, Purim morning in Shpalya, the Shpal Yized gathers together some Hasidim. He says, we have to make a little Purim spiel over here, a little mock Purim spiel. Okay, sure, everyone's in, no problem. He says, we're going to do a court case, and we're donning Yankel, who stole the coins that belonged to the government. Okay? So he says, you're going to be the judge, you're going to be the two witnesses, you're the jury, you're the audience members. And he says, and what are you? They ask him, what are you? I'm going to be the lawyer. Just 1 second. He goes into his room, puts on red shoes, white gloves. He comes out, and they start the case. They start the proceedings. And the Shpal Yized, they're now dressed up as this mythical lawyer that he described, starts advocating, about the witnesses and this and that. And, within a few minutes, he changes the minds, and the judge adjudicates it. He pounds his gavel on the table, and he says, yes, Yankel is not guilty, and he's free to go. Okay, and everyone goes on with their Purim. A few days later, Yankel gets back from wherever the town where the court was, and he calls him to Shpal Yized, how'd it go? So he wouldn't believe it. Right when I walked in, the lawyer was standing there with the white gloves, as he described it, the red shoes, and he said, I was waiting for you, and he took me right in front of the judge, and within a matter of minutes, he said, this taina, that taina, and everything was resolved. And the Shpal Yized nodded knowingly, yeah, makes sense, I have this lawyer over there who does it. So this is a story that's brought down. Supposedly there's more stories of the Shpal Yized like this. So Purim costumes, it seems, could be more than just Purim costumes sometimes. And Freilich and Purim.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.